All right, Nikki, do you want to go ahead and introduce Susan?
Sue Heath is the Director of Conservation Research at the Gulf Coast Bird Observatory. And one of her many hats that she is wearing and research activities that she's doing is this wintering shrike project. So last year was the first year. She's going to give us a report on that and then request volunteers for the upcoming wintering shrike project. Take it away, Sue.
Hi, everybody. I appreciate the time to talk to everybody this morning. This is a really fun project that we started last year, and we had a pilot year so we could get our act together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the project's about and show you some of the results from last year, and then ask for participants for this year. So the picture on the screen right here, that's one of our shrikes that we banded last year, and you can see the bands on it and the antenna coming out of the back. So I'll talk a little bit about that. This is a joint project between Gulf Coast Bird Observatory and Texas Mid-Coast Wildlife Refuge Complex. So I'm working on it along with Jennifer Wilson. So first, let's talk a little bit about what a shrike is. It's a grassland bird. It's about the same size as a cardinal. They like open areas with scattered shrubs and trees. So abandoned farm fields or hay fields or things like that. Fields that used to have row crops but that are overgrowing are perfect for them. They've been called a songbird with the raptor's habits because of what they eat and how they eat it. They eat insects and all sorts of things. You can see the list there. Their nickname is the butcher bird because a lot of times when they catch something, they will impale it on a thorn or a piece of barbed wire or something and save it for later. So if you, I actually have a collection of photos of impaled items, which includes, a lot of birds and mammals and reptiles. One of the shrike researchers in Arkansas actually saw a shrike in a McDonald's parking lot go down and grab a piece of bacon that somebody had discarded and took it up and impaled it on something to eat later. So I guess they like McDonald's too. So this is the range of shrikes, and you can see that in the southern U.S. it goes pretty much across the whole country. But then in the northern states, they're mostly in the western U.S. There are a few pockets of them in the eastern U.S., notably that one up in Canada, in Ontario. That population is endangered. And the ones that are in the pink, they are there in the breeding season only, and so they migrate into the area that is purple during the winter. So you can see where Texas is. Our part of Texas is in that purple part. So we have shrikes year round, and we have resident shrikes that stay here all year. They don't migrate. But in the winter, we get a big influx of migratory shrikes from that northern part of the range. And that's what we're interested in researching. So our research questions, while we still have lots of shrikes in Texas, they have undergone a significant decline over the last 50 years, about 80% decline. So that's pretty significant, similar to a lot of other grassland birds because that habitat is being destroyed at a rapid rate. So as I said, in Texas, we have both resident and migrant shrikes, but we don't know where our migrant shrikes come from. We don't know the ones that we have here in the winter that don't breed here. We don't know where they breed. So that's one of the things we'd like to find out. But more importantly, we need to understand how those migrant shrikes fit in with our resident shrikes. So, the resident shrikes have an advantage because they're here all year. They set up their territory, and we don't know if the resident shrikes are taking all the good habitat, and when the migrants show up, they are shunted off into habitat that is not as good. because the residents are taking up all the good stuff, or do the residents not maintain their territory in the winter and leaving some room for the migrants to get some good habitat. So we're trying to tease out that information, because the importance of that is that it's the migratory populations that have suffered the biggest declines. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that how a migrant bird does in the winter has a strong effect on their next breeding season. So if they had a good winter and they had lots to eat, and they do well when they migrate, that supports their migration back to where they breed. And when they get there, they're in good physical condition and they can breed well. But if they had a bad winter and didn't have enough food or didn't have good habitat, when they migrate, that's going to take a lot out of them. And when they get back to where they breed, then they're not going to be in as good a physical shape, and they won't be able to have a successful breeding season. So we really need to understand how those migrant shrikes are doing here in Texas to try to figure out if the winter habitat is contributing to that decline. So what we're doing is we're trapping birds so we can take some feather and blood samples, because you can't tell a migrant shrike from a resident shrike just by looking at them. But if we take some feather and blood samples, we can do a bunch of analyses on those, and we can figure out basically where they bred. So we'll know if they bred here, if they bred somewhere north of here. And we're putting transmitters on them so that we can track how they're using the habitat. So we're using our MODIS network to track them. The transmitters that we put on them can be picked up by our MODIS network, and that's a whole another subject. If you don't know what that is, I can explain that at another time. But we're also tracking them manually. The MODIS network doesn't give us, it's a really coarse overview of where the bird is. It doesn't say specifically where the bird is. It'll just say, it's within this certain area. So we need more specific information about exactly where the bird is. So we're using Master Naturalist to help us track these birds using a handheld VHF antenna, so that we can get a bunch of points of exactly where they are, and then we can map out their territory using all that data. So we did a trial run of that last year so we could figure out how to do it, and we had a lot of help from a lot of you. It was really great help, and we couldn't have done this without you. So once we have that data, Jennifer Wilson spent a lot of time over the summer working with ArcMap and figuring and the programming package R to figure out how to actually map out these territories from the points. It's not a simple thing at all, but she did a lot of work on that, and I'm going to show you some of the charts of the territories from the birds that we tracked in just a minute. So, but once we have their territory mapped out, then we can look at the habitat characteristics within that territory.
There she is.
Once we know who's a migrant and who's a resident, we can compare the territories and see if there's differences in the habitat. So, how are Master Naturalists helping? Well, you guys, last year we had teams of 2 to 4 people. I only have one set of this equipment to track them because it's expensive. So we can't have multiple teams out at the same time. So we scheduled a team for either the morning or an afternoon, one day a week. And then, so that team went out during their allotted time, and they found each bird in their area using the handheld receiver, and they collected information about the habitat and the location of the bird. So here's just some pictures of some of you guys helping us out. There's Katie Braddock holding a shrike that we caught, and there's Mickey and Sandy with Mickey's holding the receiver, so you can see it's not a big heavy thing or anything. She's holding up the antenna. And here's some more pictures. Luann Salinas is writing down some data. Hopefully this year we're gonna have we're not going to use paper data sheets, I'm hoping, but we'll see how that goes. That's another thing Jennifer's trying to figure out. There's Houston holding a shrike, and there's Jennifer and Bob Whitmarsh. They're scanning a field, trying to see if they can find a shrike. And then Bill Ahlstrom and Kathy Purvis are writing down some data up there. So you can see you're out along roadsides in the country. As long as you feel safe with the people you're with, you don't have to worry too much about COVID doing this project. So here's the territory. This is a bird that we banded at Brazoria Wildlife Refuge at the volunteer village. If you know where that is, it's that's Bastrop Bayou there on the left, and there's a fishing pier there. So we banded this bird along the road that goes through the middle of that territory. The little black dots that you can see are all of the points that we took of where that bird was. So and then Jennifer ran this through all of her mapping stuff, and it came out with that black line as being the territory for this bird. So this one's pretty compact. It's only 6.8 acres, which is pretty small. I haven't got the data back yet from the analysis saying who's a resident and who's a migrant, but I know this is a resident bird because I watched it breed this year. So I know that it's still there. So it has a pretty small territory. You can see that most of it is just grassland, and they really like to hang out in that little U-shaped driveway thing where the RVs are for the volunteer village. There's a lot of trees there that they can perch in, and a lot of good habitat for catching insects and small mammals. This is a bird down at Sargent that we caught along the Intracoastal Waterway, and that's the Intracoastal Waterway there in the Gulf of Mexico. So this bird had a completely different strategy. You can see that its territory was 59 acres, which is much like 5-6 times the size of the other bird. But you can also see that in this territory, there's a lot of unusable habitat. Anywhere there's water, that bird can't hunt for food. There's also a lot of, there's construction in here. They're building a bridge across the Intracoastal Waterway there, so that's probably non-usable habitat for this bird. So it had to have a bigger area so that it would have enough food. This one, I don't know if it's a resident or a migrant. I suspect it's a resident, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, it just shows the different size of territories that these birds can have based on where they are. So I'll just show you one more. This is also a bird at Sargent, the neighborhood bird. It was in a neighborhood. I don't know what that channel is there. I don't think that's Caney Creek. I think that's just a channel that houses are all along. So this bird had a little bit of water in its territory as well, but not as much as the other one. And 16 acres, that's twice the size of the first bird, but a third of the size of the second bird. So again, a very different size territory. It's in a residential area with a lot of mowed grass. And this bird, we found this bird a lot hunting for insects in that mowed grass. So next year, I guess I should have said the 2020-2021 season, because we do this from November through the end of February. So our field sites for next year is going to be, there's 2 different ones. The first one is some combination of Surfside, Blue Water Highway, and Quintana. We have to put out 5 transmitters in each site, and I want the birds to be far enough apart so that their territories don't overlap. So once we go out there and start trapping birds, we'll determine if we need to use all 3 of those areas to get 5 birds. But that just gives you an idea of where it'll be. And then the second site will be San Bernard Wildlife Refuge, and if we have to go off of the refuge, we'll just do some of the roads along there. We'll probably do the gravel road that leads into San Bernard, and then we might go along the farm to market road that goes down to the Intracoastal Waterway. We'll see. Again, we'll see how far we have to range out to get 5 birds. So last year we tried to get 30 points per bird, which was a bit of a challenge for some of them. And Jennifer determined from her analysis that we really need to get more than that. So this year we're going to try to get 50 points for each bird. So we really need a lot of teams out there looking for these birds. And as I said, hopefully we're going to have data entry via an application that can run. I have a Samsung tablet that you guys can use, but you can also download it onto your phone. It's called Survey 123. It's an ArcMap application, and so it'll be much easier for data entry. You just have to punch on a bunch of buttons to select, the things that match each field, and that'll make it easier for us because the data will already be input into ArcMap, and hopefully it'll make it easier for you too, and we won't have any handwriting issues. Last year we had I had to get a little creative with figuring out some of the things that were written on the field sheet. So hopefully we'll avoid all of those problems and make things a lot easier by doing that. So if you want to help with this, and we very much appreciate your help, there's my email. You can send me an email. Because of COVID concerns, we prefer that you guys figure out your own teams so that you can go out with someone that you feel is safe, that is, abiding by COVID restrictions in the similar manner that you are. But if you can't, if you want to participate and you don't have a team, then let me know and we'll see if we can pair people up. I think we can do this safely with COVID, where it's an outdoor activity. You do have to ride in a vehicle, but you could go in separate vehicles if you wanted, or you could keep the windows down. You could wear masks in the vehicle. It's up to you guys, whatever you feel safe with. I don't want to put you in a position where you feel like you're doing something that's putting your health at risk. So that's completely up to you how you want to handle that. I would like to have 10 teams, so that minimum, so we can cover each weekday morning and afternoon. If you want to do a weekend, that's also fine. We can arrange that. I think Jennifer and I are probably going to have to fill in some of the weekends if no one wants to do that, because we're going to need to have some points during that time period too. Just that picture down in the right corner is a picture Jackie took. We had this one bird on the tour loop at Brazoria, and it liked to hang out on that windmill. It's down there by that old windmill down there by the tank. She had a great picture of it sitting up there. So I think that's it. Yep. So I'll leave my email up there. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. So we had a couple of questions, and one was, how is MODIS used to track migration patterns? I believe you already touched on it a little bit, but if you'd like to elaborate.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about MODIS. MODIS stands for movement in Latin, and it is a collaborated network of researchers from all over the world, really. It started in Canada, with Bird Studies Canada has spearheaded this, and what it is just a global tracking mechanism for birds that have a certain kind of transmitter on them. So we here on the Texas coast, because we're such a huge migratory corridor for birds passing through, we have 15 of these towers along the coast, and ours go from Texas City down to Lockport, and each of them has at least 2 antennas, and they reach out. I think it's 12 miles, the antenna. So we tried to just make a fence along the coast. There's a few gaps, but so that any bird that's migrating through and passes through that fence will get picked up by one of these towers. And then it's mostly for long distance migrants. It will tell you when they pass across the Texas coast. So, but you can also use it for local research, and that's what we're using it for the shrikes.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question was, do you know, if I can interrupt and ask whoever has an open mic to please mute your microphone. The next question is, do you know if any of last year's birds that were trapped were migrants?
No, I don't know that yet. I was gonna go out and try to keep track of them, but the shutdown of everything messed that up, and then by the time we were allowed to go out again, I couldn't find most of them. So I don't know what the status of them is, except for the one at the volunteer village. That one I know is still there.
All right, thank you. Next question, was it ever determined what went wrong with some of the transmitters?
So I've been working with Low Tech on that. That's the company that built the transmitters. Unfortunately, they really wanted me to recatch one of those birds with a broken transmitter. I could send it back and make it look. I was not able to do that. These birds are pretty smart, and once they get caught once, they are not going to fall for it a second time. Plus, the COVID restrictions messed me up on that too. So they're gonna try a little bit different design this year, but we may have a similar problem this year. We'll see. Hopefully we won't. But if we do, then I'll try immediately to start trying to catch the bird so I can send it back and analyze it.
All right, thank you. Next question, any chance of getting a second tracking antenna? Seems it could potentially be easier to get 50 points per bird.
Well, so it takes two receivers per team. You have to have two receivers so that you can triangulate on a bird if it's out in the middle of a field. And the receivers cost about $3,000 a piece. So I don't think we'll be getting another set of those anytime soon.
All right, thank you. And let's see. Another question, is this a once a week commitment?
Yeah, it is once a week. If you can't commit to that much, then maybe you can team up with someone who can, or you can alternate weeks or something like that.
All right. And I believe there's a couple of comments, but I believe that wraps up the questions.